Hi, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. So excited here because we're going to be talking about my top books of 2024. I could not narrow down a top 10. There was no way. I had too many favorites. I read 120 books this year and I have it narrowed down to 13, which is, I think, pretty good. 13 was the best I could do to narrow it down. I read a lot of really good books. I tried to do like a top 10 and like some honorable mentions. I couldn't. All of these were favorites, okay? How they make it to my favorites list is these are ones that I am still thinking about. They're ones that I'm still recommending, I'm still talking about. They're ones that I'll most likely reread later. And a couple of these made it on my top 10 books of all time, actually. So that's pretty impressive. They will be in order. So I'm saving my most favorite for last. All of them are horror except for one. So yeah, let's get into it. Number 13 is Wolf Hunt by Jeff Strand. These two thugs have been contracted to transport a werewolf across Florida. Neither one of them think he's really a werewolf. They've got him in the back of the van in a cage. Well, things go awry when he escapes. They're chasing this werewolf. He's a smartass. He's very snarky. There's a lot of banter, which if you've read a Jeff Strand book, you know to expect some really hilarious banter. It's pretty violent. No one is safe in this book. Gonna warn you with that. These two, George and Lou, I think the funniest was them problem solving, trying to come up with solutions to try to catch the werewolf was hilarious. A lot of them were epic fails, and it was just hysterical. Just a really good time. Absolutely hilarious. Obviously check triggers, but really good. Number 12 spot is gonna be Woman Eating by Claire Coda. It was just very cozy and comforting for me, even though it was horror. Our main character is a young mixed race vampire, and she's just trying to learn to exist among humans, basically. She has an eating disorder, which is a very interesting take on the vampire trope. I won't tell you why she has an eating disorder, but she does. She's constantly hungry, like she's dealing with this constant hunger. This deals with a complicated mother-daughter relationship. Her mother is very narcissistic and she's very manipulative. She's constantly grappling with not wanting her mother to be her problem, but knowing that she is all her mother has. And it doesn't help that her mother is constantly being manipulative. She has this, you know, that guilt and that weight all the time. She's kind of created this like kind of community for herself. She's living with these artists and she works at this artsy place as well. So the whole thing feels very creative and artistic and also poetic, and it's just really pretty. Also, I forgot to mention, her mom is, I believe she's Malaysian British vampire, and her dad was Japanese human, and her mom turned her when she was a baby. So I forgot to mention that as well. I loved the ending. Can't tell you anything about it, obviously, but I really loved the ending. I loved the whole book. It just felt very artsy and creative, and it was just really pretty, and I loved it. I loved it. It felt very cozy. Next, our number 11 is Gig of the Damned by Freak. Our main character is Antonio, aka Gable Donifart, is the drag queen name, and this one follows a bunch of drag queens, and they are getting ready for a big pageant, and there can only be one crown. There can only be one queen. Unfortunately, all the drag queens are being picked off one by one in very horrific ways. This is so freaking good. Love all the drag queen names. They're all very original, very hilarious. I think my favorite one is Ho Behave. I love that name. It's so good. There's also Donna Fire. That's really good. All of the kills are really original and very horrific. You don't know who the one who is offing everybody is. You don't know who it is, obviously. But whoever it is shows up in a pink bedazzled ski mask. And it's kind of a running joke throughout. It's hilarious. It's obviously a slasher. It's extreme. And it also has that comedy aspect to it. But there's also a touch of seriousness because there are these chapters in between that goes back to Antonio's childhood. So there's commentary on growing up queer and going through school and dealing with bullies and just dealing with, having a hard time being accepted. So, parts of it are kind of heartbreaking and really sad. So there's that aspect of it too. It has multiple layers, and I had the best time. Very original, very creative. This was my first book. I've already read a second book. You're going to get a review later in the month. Or you'll probably get the review earlier next month. But I've already read a second book, and both of them have been amazing. So I'm at this point would buy anything this author writes. I've had a great time with both. Number 10 spot is Interview with the Devil by Michael Harbron. You probably could have guessed this was going to end up on my list. I was sent this by Scrubs Magazine. They wanted me to review it for their book club. This is excellent. This one follows Joseph. Joseph, it starts out in his childhood. His parents are very religious, and religion is almost shoved down his throat. When he's a kid, he and his sister are in the basement. His parents are late getting home from getting groceries, which is very unlike them. And while in the basement, he sees this demon. Unfortunately, he's the only one that sees it. His sister doesn't see it, and he gets very scared. His sister gets scared too at first, but they run up the stairs, and anyways, like, they're all frantic when their parents get home, but it's a whole thing. Well, his whole childhood is like that with these demons. He keeps seeing these demons, but he's the only one that sees them. And it really sets the whole scene for the rest of the book and his whole childhood. But those first, the scenes with the demons were so scary and so creepy, the way they were written. But his childhood, it deals a lot with like religious trauma and all of that. Well, because of his childhood, he developed a cynicism toward religion. He developed this negativity. He ends up at some point interviewing the devil. That's all I can really say about the plot. I will say this is the first book in a trilogy, so this is really setting the groundwork for the rest of the series. It's a slower pace. You're getting to know Joseph, you're getting to know other characters, you're getting to know his past, you're getting to know the whys, and you're getting to know the past with his family, the past with other characters within the book. It's world building. It's really setting everything up for the rest of this trilogy and the rest of this series. So, it's a slower build. It is very much worth it. The interview doesn't happen until later in the book, so it does take a little bit to get to that. It is so worth it because the devil is very fascinating, and that interview is just very fascinating. This is very thought-provoking, and yeah, it is excellent. And I've already read the second book in the series, couldn't wait. It's very good as well. I just put one of these on the list, but I would say both of them would have made it. Like, you could say both of these together, the first and second, made it into my top books. Excellent. The second one is definitely more extreme, but they were both really good, and I'll be reading another one very soon. Yeah, really excellent. Number 9, we have Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. This was a buddy read I did with the Grim Hobbyist, and like several months ago, but I still remember it very well. This one follows Lori, and Lori has an obsession, an infatuation with serial killers, and she has been writing this serial killer who is in prison. His name is Edmund Cox, and she's been writing him, she's been visiting him. Well, he sends her on a quest to deliver a key to the Riverman. She's to go to Edmund's cabin in the woods in the middle of freaking nowhere. She's to go to Edmund's cabin, find the key, and take this key to the Riverman. And the Riverman doesn't even have like an address or anything. And Lori is an idiot. She's such a freaking idiot. And she decides to take along her disabled sister on this weird, creepy, very ominous quest to the middle of nowhere that she has been given by a serial killer. She thinks that's a great idea. But yeah, like I said, she's an idiot. And I hate her. You're gonna hate her. I think part of the experience of this book is hating Lori. Like, I think it's just part of it. It is part of it. And one of the things that Christopher Triana does really well is he writes very despicable, very deplorable characters very well. Like I said in my Q&A video, he writes characters that will make your skin crawl. He is very good at that. They are so realistic, so terrifying. They are people that if you met in real life, they would be so scary. And the thing is, they are so realistic too. These kind of people are out there, and I think that makes it even scarier. But yeah, this was so gritty and so raw and just eerie. She and I, when we did the buddy read, we were trying to keep each other's pace, and both of us wanted to just keep reading. It was just, we both had a hard time with that because it was so good. But he has a way of just like drawing you in. From the very first page, his writing is so good. As they're going on this quest, Lori is also, you're going back to Lori's past. You're getting other characters from her past. They meet other characters along the way, along the river, that are creepy as hell. And, you know, just they're getting other characters. Some are good, some are bad. The river itself is kind of a character. But yeah, you're getting all this. It's got layers. But yeah, it's very raw and very gritty, very creepy. But yeah, this is a whole, it's not a very thick book, but there's a lot to this. There's a lot to unpack here, and I keep saying I'm going to read part 2. I still haven't, but this was really good. We have number 8 spot, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This one I have the hardest time explaining, and I don't want to give anything away, so I'm going to read you the back of this one. It follows 4 American Indian men after a disturbing event from their youth puts them in a desperate struggle for their lives. Tracked by an entity bent on revenge, these childhood friends are helpless as the culture and traditions they left behind catch up to them in a violent, vengeful way. Based on reviews, people either love it or they hate it, or they just completely don't get it. It's one of those things. Obviously, I'm in the love it side of things. I will warn you that the animals do not fare well in this. But it is not for no reason. It is not for the hell of it. It very much is part of the plot. It's important to the plot. Also, I will say, if you're looking for a book that hands over the plot on a silver platter, this is not for you. It's going to make you work for it a little bit. It's going to make you think. It kind of lets you figure things out for yourself. I liked that. I appreciated that. Took me a little bit to get into it. Took me a little bit to figure out the writing style. But once I got it, I was hooked. And now I need to read everything by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a book about guilt, about grief, about revenge, and it was very powerful. It was raw and it was emotional. He can weave a story like I've never seen. It was so layered, and he's definitely a storyteller. One of the best storytellers I think I've ever come across, like ever. This was for my in-person book club, and one of the girls had picked it, and she had already read it once, and she wanted to read it again, so she chose it just so she would have a group to read it with, because she had questions. And I can see why. This is one of those that's really good for a group read, because there's so much to discuss, and there's just so many different topics that you could branch away and talk about. So many ways that you could talk about this. So many lessons here. I really enjoyed reading about the Native American experience and Native American culture. I learned a lot from it, and it was fascinating. And also, I will tell you that if it hadn't been for book club, I probably would have DNF'd it, and I'm so glad that I didn't. The animal parts were very hard to read because I have a hard time with it. They were really hard to read. I'm glad I toughed it out because it was worth it. It was very good, very well written. The horror came out of nowhere. Like, for a long time, I'm like, where are we going with this? Where is he going with this? But when it got there, I was like, oh, there it is. It was out of freaking nowhere. Very intricate story and a huge message there that, like I said, is very powerful, and I loved it. Our number 7 spot is Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. So I'm not going to go into what this is about because of triggers, because it can be triggering. I will let you look it up. You may remember me talking about this one. Before this book, I had heard people say, like, this book wrecked me, whatever. I never understood that term until this book, because this one did. This one completely wrecked me. It broke my heart. I had never had that experience before. I had never had a book make me feel as deeply as this one did. because it's so vulnerable and so raw and so so real that, yeah, this one got me. It's one that if you can handle the subject matter, I think everybody should read it. Everybody should read this book because it's something that happens every single day. And it's one of those things that isn't reported for reasons, and this one goes into the why. It's just very powerful. And for something that's such a hard subject matter, it was told so beautifully, so poetic. Another thing that was very important was how all of these men handled it differently. Like one handled it with humor, another handled it with anger. One of them was worried about, like, he wasn't even worried about himself so much as like, how are my kids going to handle this? How is my family going to handle this? You know, one of them handled it with humor. So it's like one of those lessons of just because somebody is laughing doesn't mean they're not hurting and doesn't mean they're not going through something. So yeah, this was just very powerful. You know, it's one of those things, like I said, it could be very triggering, but if you can handle it, I think it's an important one. Number 6, we have Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. Okay, this one, Ro has recently gone through a breakup and she completely has relocated and started over. She goes to this farmer's market and she runs across this woman named Ash. When she meets Ash, she's completely mesmerized by her. And, you know, she's sort of almost becomes obsessed with her. You know, she can't get enough of her. She wants to learn as much about her as possible. She starts finding excuses to see her. Ash sells these cupcakes, so all of a sudden she just starts eating cupcakes all the time. You know, she starts trying different flavors, and she just finds reasons to come and get cupcakes and all this. You know, and honestly, when I was reading this, I was kind of intrigued by Ash too. Like I got the appeal, honestly. Because she was just so interesting and mysterious. It was beautiful. It was stunning. Like, look at this freaking cover too, by the way. But it had cottagecore vibes to it. And honestly, at first I'm like, are we sure this is horror? Because this almost feels just like a sapphic romance. Because it didn't have horror vibes at all. But then there's a shift in tone, and you feel it when it happens, but there's definitely a shift in tone. Unless you have triggers, like if you start looking up triggers, like it could very much give the whole thing away. You pretty much know where it's going. Like the author does give hints, and like you pretty much know where it's going, and I think that's very much intentional. I think she wants you to feel that sense of dread because she wants you to know. Like as a reader, she wants you to be almost like outside looking in. I think she wants you to feel that like sense of dread for Ro, like, girl, get out of there. Like, because the whole time I'm like, girl, get out of there. What are you doing? Like, I just want to scream into the book, like, no, get out of there. But anyway, so because you feel it the whole time, you're like, you see all these little red flags, and Ro, like, she just keeps making excuses. Like, I think maybe this is just how female relationships are. Maybe I just need to give her space, whatever. She's just making all these excuses. Even though I sensed where it was going, I was still blown away. I was still shocked. It was so good. So gorgeous. I wanted to immediately reread it when it was done. That's how good it was. It was amazing. So good and so toxic. Number 5 spot is Into the Drowning Deep by Myra Grant. So many people had recommended this book to me, and I'm so glad that y'all did. It's a chunkier book, but it was so worth it. There were times of it that it felt like a little slower. It was so worth it. I read this whenever I did a mermaid readathon that was hosted by the Brightside Girl. 7 years before, a ship had been sent out to the Mariana Trench to film a mockumentary. The mockumentary was bringing to life like ancient sea creatures. Well, the ship had washed up and all the crew were like gone. But there was found footage, and the crew had been like taken out by killer mermaids. And it was pretty gory and gruesome. Well, a lot of people thought it was a hoax. So now it's, 7 years after that, and another ship is being sent out to see if mermaids really exist. So this ship has all these scientists, and some of them are like crew members and videographers and stuff. One of the scientists on this new crew is Victoria. Well, she has a personal reason for going, even though she's a scientist too. Her sister was one of the ones on that original ship, and she wants to know what really happened to her sister. The big reason this one made the list is because this, in a very rare instant, I think this is the only book really that has really scared me and really gotten to me. It's not very often that happens. I mean, I've read some creepy books, but like not ones that really scared me and really got to where like I was holding my breath. Like I literally held my breath in parts of this, and it was freaking terrifying. And let me tell you, it was not the mermaids that got me, because this is a book about killer mermaids. It was the depths of the ocean, the darkness of the ocean, and there were some claustrophobic moments that were absolutely terrifying. Oh my God. They were so realistic. The whole thing felt very realistic. The way it's written is like, it made me feel like mermaids are real. That's how realistic this book is. I may never step foot in the ocean ever again. Like, it was so scary. So scary. Even if you don't have a fear, because I didn't think I had a fear of tight spaces, but I think I do now. I think maybe I've developed some phobias from this book. Another thing I really appreciate about this book is that there was a very diverse cast of characters, and there was a lot of different representation in this that you don't see in a lot of books. And the fact that they were all scientists was really cool. There was an autistic scientist. There were two like twin deaf scientists. One of them even got to have her own submersible. She had her own submersible. It's so cool. I loved that for her. There was queer representation. There was a disabled scientist. I'm trying to remember. There was like all this different representation, and I loved it. It's been a while since I read it, but I remember, and there was a lot of diversity too within the characters. There was more to the storyline than just mermaids and all that. There was a lot more to the storyline than that, but it was really good. Number 4 is Misery by Stephen King. I've been meaning to read this for years, and I finally got to it. I still haven't watched the movie. I would really like to wait for a snowy day to watch the movie, and it would be even cooler if I could rent a cabin. You probably know the story. Paul Sheldon is a famous writer. It's snowy, and he has this car accident, and he is rescued by Annie Wilkes. Annie is his #1 fan. She pulls him from the wreckage, takes him to her cabin in the middle of freaking nowhere, and she's kind of taking care of him in her cabin. She used to be a nurse, and she has all the pain meds and all the medication that he could possibly want or not want. It's snowy, it's isolated, they're in the middle of nowhere, nobody knows where he is. He very quickly realizes that he's in a bad situation because Annie is batshit crazy. She loves his books, and he's written this whole series. I think it's romance, but he's written this whole series, and the main character is this woman, Misery. And it's Annie's favorite character. She hasn't read the latest book yet because it like has just come out, or hasn't been on the shelves yet. Well, while he's in her care, the book comes out, and she picks it up and she reads it, and she finds out that he's killed off her favorite character, and she's pissed. And she basically tells him, look, you're writing her back. You're not leaving here until you write Misery back into these books. You're writing her back. And he's really fucked up. Like, when he had his accident, he busted his leg all up. Like, his leg is, I mean, he really is messed up. Like, he's in really bad shape. Like, this dude probably needs like surgeries and stuff. He's in really bad shape, and now he's in her care, this crazy person's care, and he's got to write a book. Annie does some really not nice things to him while he's there. You have his thoughts too, and he's very like witty, and he's kind of snarky, and he has this sense of humor. And it's amazing that he like kept his wits about him the whole time, and he kept that sense of humor the whole time. The whole time I wanted him to escape so bad. And I can only imagine what the movie's like. Like, the way Stephen King describes pain is so good. Like, it's next level. I mean, it puts you into Paul's predicament. It puts you into his situation, like you really feel for him. It's so well written, and like I couldn't put this book down. I had to know. I had to know what was going to happen next. You didn't know. Like Annie is so freaking unpredictable because she's so fucking nuts. The ending took it from a 4-star to a 5-star. This was almost a 4-star for me until the ending. That's all I can say is that it took it from a 4 to a 5. But excellent. Number 3 is Walking Practice by Dolki Min. This one is translated by Victoria Caudle. That's the translator. It says it on here, but it's very tiny. Cover is excellent. This one is about an alien who has crash landed on Earth, and they use dating apps to find their prey because they have to feed. That's what it's about on the surface level. It's also, like, if you dig a little deeper, it's about what it means to be gender fluid in a world that isn't always accepting. That's not a spoiler. Like, if you look on the synopsis, like on like Goodreads or Storygraph or whatever, it says that there. There's notes in the back from the translator. I'm going to read you this one little part real quick. Translating this novel at a time when queer activists in Korea are fighting for an anti-discrimination bill and when the rights of queer Americans are under sustained attack reinforces my goal as a translator to make queer narratives visible and visceral. While the novel may be positioned under the umbrella of speculative fiction, many of Mumu's fears and the dangers they face are mirrored in the fears and dangers faced by queer people, not only in Korea, but around the world. The fear of being outed, the threat of persecution, the potential to be met with violence in the pursuit of love. Walking Practice is a novel that yearns for community as much as it is a novel that plays with notions of gender and sexual expression. I mean, if you wanted to just enjoy this novel as the alien that is like torturing people, you could. But it does have that deeper meaning too, and I loved that. I thought it was very clever. I thought it was very well written. I loved that it had that double meaning. You would think it would be either very sad or very terrifying, but the tone was so comedic. And I thought that was really cool that they were able to keep that tone with such a heavy topic either way. Because the alien, they keep these torture devices in their backpack and they can transform to whatever sex they want based on what their prey is attracted to. Because they use this dating app and they find out what their prey is attracted to. You're getting their mundane thoughts throughout the days, and they're so snarky and irritated, and you get all their like annoyances and their grievances, and it's just really funny. They have like normal emotions the same way we do, that, you know, fear and loneliness and social anxiety and trying to make themselves as small as possible on the subway. They're constantly grappling with hunger and loneliness because they're not supposed to be on this planet. They crash landed here and they feel alone here. They feel lonely here. So it goes back to that, like being gender fluid and kind of feeling alienated in society. And also there's commentary on the societal gender norms and how if you're male, you're supposed to fit in this little box, and if you're female, you're supposed to fit in this little box. And this was just, it was really well done. Even though it could have been a heavy topic, I liked how it was tackled, and I liked the tone, and I loved it. And I loved that the end was really good. The whole thing was just, it was a fun read, even though it's about an alien kind of torturing people. Not kind of, was. And there were some really wild sex scenes in this. Number 2. This one is my only non-horror in this, and this one ended up on my top 10 books of all time. And that is All the Lovers in the Night by Miyako Kawakami. This one follows Fuyuko. Fuyuko lives in a big city, and she is a freelance copy editor. She's recently decided to work from home. So she doesn't really get out much. Her friend is her editor. It's really the only person she mostly has contact with. And she's really lonely. It's a big city. It's hard to make friends there. She one day is, you know, walking and she sees her reflection in the mirror, and she kind of sees she sees a reflection and she doesn't really like what she sees, and she decides to do something about that. And when she does this, when this change starts to take place, some painful episodes from her past come up, and her behavior starts to slip further and further, and things take a turn. There's commentary on alcoholism, there's commentary on loneliness and being alone, and especially like being alone in a big city. This was so gorgeous. It was stunning. It was magical, glittery, but it was also very subtle. It's the best way I can describe it. It's kind of subtle but also magical at the same time. Absolutely gorgeous. I loved the way the night was described, and especially lights at night. It was set in the summer, so summer is an excellent time to read this, but I would read this anytime. But it was set in the summer if you're a seasonal reader. The conversations she has with her friend Hijiri, that's her editor, are like normal conversations that you would have with a friend, like especially like two girls having a conversation, like two females having a conversation, like work and guys and dating and all that, like normal girl conversations. But so they're very relatable, but they're told in a way that it's I would have these moments of, yes, you took the words right out of my mouth, but it's told in a way that I wouldn't have thought to say it. You know what I mean? It's just told so beautifully. And then she meets this guy, and now the conversations those two had were more thought-provoking, and a lot more, they had a lot more depth to them. But Fuyuko, she has this thing where she observes people a lot, so there's a lot of human observation and a lot of human behaviors observed in this. And it's almost like she's on the outside looking in, and it's almost like life is happening around her and she doesn't feel like she's a part of it. You know what I mean? Like life isn't happening to her in a way. It's not really a unique topic, but it's the way it's written that it's just very pretty and it's very relatable, and I could just read this over and over again. It's just so gorgeous. Just so gorgeous. And there's so many quotable lines in this that I just could not get enough of it. We have my #1 book, and this one ended up also on my top 10 books of all time, and that is Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. You've heard me go on and on about this book, so I'm not gonna bore you too much about it, and I'm not gonna go too much into the plot because it's hard for me to explain it, first of all, and I don't want to give anything away because there's so much to it. It's set in 1960, and there's a group of boys. It starts off on their last day of school, and some events take place. There's something evil, and these boys are trying to save their town, basically, and that's what it kind of boils down to. Of course, they have parents that kind of don't really believe them and stuff like that, but yeah, there's evil that they're trying to save their town from, essentially. Yeah, oh man, Dan Simmons, this is my first book ever by Dan Simmons. I will definitely be reading more. I think he's an excellent writer. The character development was on point. I love that all the boys have their own unique personality. All those personalities go really great together. I love their little friend group. I think it's so special. I love how they work so well together. I love how they all care for each other. And I thought he did really well at writing kid characters. I'm not always into kid characters. I think a lot of times they're either written way too juvenile where I can't relate, or they're written in a way that they're not believable and they're too adult. I thought these kids were written very well. Also, the author did a really good job of taking his time to describe the town, the school, and just really setting the scene. And I think that really paid off because it felt like I was there. I could see, hear, smell everything in this town. It felt like I was right alongside the boys having an adventure myself. And I think that really helped. I loved that. The villains in this were absolutely terrifying. I think Dan Simmons created something truly special with this one, and I have to read more. I definitely have to read more. I haven't read a lot of coming of age horror. I've read some, but I absolutely loved this. I just thought it was great. It was very nostalgic, even though I was not born in anywhere near 1960. Even still, it felt nostalgic to me. It brought me back to my 12-year-old self. The whole riding around on bicycles with friends and sleeping in tents and roasting marshmallows on campfires and all that. it just felt so summery. This is a great summer read, and I just absolutely loved it. It was excellent. Those were all the books. Those were my favorite books of 2024. Let me know down in the comments, what was your favorite book of 2024? Or if you can't pick one, you know, what was a couple of books that you loved in 2024? I would love to know. I will see you on Friday. Bye for now.